Remodelers, kitchen and bath, builders, we use something called an allowance. An allowance is simply, it's a way to move the process along. And you'll see an allowance in a proposal or a contract. An allowance is something where you say, hey, I'm going to allot $500 for the purchase of a faucet. Now, we're not purchasing this faucet today. We're not going to decide what it is today. 4 months from now, when we actually are ready to purchase the faucet, we'll decide what faucet we want to buy. Well, that $500 is essentially a placeholder. So what happens is when you go to select the faucet, you can select a faucet that's $1,000. Well, if you're in a very high-end home and you want a Newport brass faucet, you're not getting one of those for $500. So what happens is kitchen and baths or remodelers, they'll put in allowances that are too low. And what happens is as you make your selections or you sort of fill in the allowances, the price of the project actually goes up. So one of the things you really want to be cognizant of is, are these allowances in the right space for my type of project? If they're too low, you are going to be surprised when the project goes up by several $1,000s. Make sure you are looking at this in your proposal and make sure you're dealing with a company that's using allowances that are reasonable. A lot of people in this process end up with what we call decision fatigue. You end up making a lot of decisions in remodeling. And people think it's sort of pick cabinetry, pick countertop, and that's sort of it. The reality is you make a lot of decisions, and here's a list: light switches and outlets, vent covers, doorknobs, all these little details that you don't think about when you start the process. It wears people out. Our best advice on this is pick a designer that you really like, that you trust, that you can see some of their work and their design aesthetic. Because you'll get worn out on these decisions, and what you'll want to do is rely on the designer to help make these decisions. Here's a reality of this process. Your home is going to be dusty. It's going to be dirty. Good companies will put up essentially a zip wall, which is it's a temporary barrier. They will use HEPA filters. They will use back pressure. They will do things to mitigate the dust, keep the home as clean as possible. But one of the realities is your home is going to be dusty. And this is a thing where people don't always understand this before. They think you put up a wall and everything's good. It's not. You will see dust. You will see mess. This journey is far more emotional than people realize. You end up writing a lot of big checks really quickly, which when you're doing this project, for a lot of people, this is the most money they've ever spent. That isn't their house. That isn't buying their house. Your life's in chaos. You can't just walk out to your kitchen and get a cup of coffee or make a cup of tea. And the reality is, over a period of time, and this process takes weeks once the construction starts, people get stressed out and they become agitated. And what you want to do is have a company that will have a conversation with you about this up front and maybe even will help you sort of mitigate some of the stress that's coming your way. For most kitchen remodeling projects, you're going to lose functionality in your garage. Most remodelers, most kitchen and bath companies are going to come in. They're going to want some space to be able to, one, store cabinetry. While that's being ready to be installed and staged, it needs to be in an obviously environment that is not outside. The other thing is saws, equipment is going to be set up. That also needs to not be outside when it rains, so on and so forth. Most people don't realize that most kitchen and bath and remodelers, when you're doing your kitchen, are going to need some garage space for at least a few weeks. I would assume most people know this, and most people have heard this or read this or seen this or been told this, but HGTV is not real life. I don't know any other way to say it other than it's not going to happen. We are not remodeling 2 bathrooms and a kitchen for $32,000. That's unrealistic. It's not doable. People get really disappointed when they hear a number and they go, well, I thought we could do it for 10. And it's like, yeah, we're not Chip and Joanna. And I love Chip and Joanna, and they're fun, and it's a good show, and it's entertaining, but it's not realistic. How do you plan on living without a kitchen or whatever space you're remodeling for the weeks and or months that you are going to be out of that space? And for most people, we talk to them about this and they say, oh, I'll be fine. And 2 months in, as it turns out, they're not fine. And eating out every night is probably not a plan for most people. So really putting some thought into this, making sure whoever it is that you choose to do business with or have you help remodel your space, it is important that they can help you come up with a plan and talk about that, because getting up in the morning and not being able to make a cup of coffee, if you're a coffee drinker, is obviously something that will matter, and not doing that for 8 weeks straight will make you very frustrated. So definitely make a plan for how you're going to live without the space for the period of time that you're not going to be without the space. Read the scope of work carefully. Scope of work is essentially the proposal, or what work is going to be done. So for most people, they think, oh, what's the work you're actually doing? Well, you're going to read for that, and you want to make sure all the things that need to be done are written down in that scope of work or that proposal. What is just as important as what is being done is sometimes what's not being done. So think about, a simple example is think about demolition. So if there's two walls, one's being removed and the adjacent wall is not being removed, something that you want to see in the scope of work or a proposal is removing one wall on the east side, not removing the north side wall. So when you think about scope of work, it's very important to say, hey, what are you doing? And also, what are you not supposed to do? A kitchen remodel right now is a 5-week to 4-month process. I don't care what anybody tells you. The reality is you're going to spend at least 5 weeks, depending on the scope of work, often more. Generally speaking, our projects run in the 6 to 9 week space, but very difficult to finish a kitchen in under 5 weeks if you're replacing the countertops. And depending on the selections and the materials used, obviously you can wait, you can do backsplashes, you can do things that actually extend that well past 9 weeks and sometimes into 3-4 months. Plan that unexpected things are going to happen. Every remodeling project that we do, the initial proposal that's signed is never the final price. Now, don't hear that and say it's always more, because sometimes it's not. Good contractors, good kitchen and baths, they will essentially put in what are contingencies. They put in healthy selection amounts, and basically allow you to be prepared. And a good contingency, or an example of a contingency, I guess, is when you're removing a soffit, something that we never know is what's inside that soffit. So good contractors, good kitchen and bath will put in essentially a contingency. So they'll say, hey, I'm going to put a placeholder of $1,500 in here for when we rip that soffit out. I don't know what's in there. I don't know what's going to come of that. We will know once we rip it out, but you will be prepared. We'll have some money budgeted for that particular known thing that might go wrong. There's also things that just go wrong. There's things that, we were in a home the other day and the cabinetry was 50 years old, and when they installed the cabinetry, they put a nail right through a drain pipe, and that nail had been there for 50 years. When we took that nail out, immediately started leaking. We would have never known that. No one would have ever known that. And the point being, unexpected things happen.